Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Morning Jumpstart. I'm Jason Meyer with Cindy Meyer,
Good morning.
my co-pilot. Actually, she's the real pilot. I'm just the entertainment. So this morning, what we're doing is we're doing the compositional studies for our class. This will be the first part this morning. We'll work for 30 minutes on the moonscape. And what I'm going to do is talk us through the decisions I make them and why we make them. And then tonight we'll do part 2 on our sketch club on Facebook. Everything will be linked in the school so that if you don't get to see it live or if you want to see it again, you can go right into school. It'll be labeled. You can go down to what you need, click, and you're there. All right, so let's take a quick reminder of what we're doing here. What is the purpose of our 4-value compositional study? So the purpose of the 4-value compositional study is 1, to size and place big, let me stress big, masses, values, divisions. And when I say big, we're talking 2, 3, 4, not a lot, just a few simple pieces. Which brings us to another purpose of the compositional studies, is to see the entire thing simply, right? What you're doing is you're not studying really for a product. This isn't for the study to end up looking beautiful. In the end, it's great if it does, but the purpose of the study is to give you vision, to give you a clear vision of the painting you want to produce. All right, some of the other purposes, right? Create an eye path for the viewer. How are we traveling through this canvas? And then, of course, the canvas format, which simply means the dimensions. Is it a 1x2, a 3x4, a 2x3? What are the dimensions, the proportions of the canvas? So the main masses and size to place for a landscape are going to be, our main one is our sky and our ground. That's the biggest division. And then on the ground, we'll have flat plains, or our ground, our flat ground, our trees, which will be vertical, hills or diagonals. Ground is horizontal, and the sky's our light source. The main movement in the landscape is depth, meaning near to far, going into. Okay? So, with all those things in mind, we're going to start our timer and get going. Let's see, Miss Shakti's here. Good morning, good morning. We love you too. Thank you, thank you. Miss Cindy's here taking care of everything. And Miss Schaefer. Good morning, Susan. And Peggy. Hey, I like your, what is that thing called? Avatar? Your picture?
Yeah.
I dig it. I dig it. Good morning. All right, so let's get rocking here. 30 minutes is going to go by fast. So our compositional study is going to be a 9x12 inch this morning. That's the same proportions of our painting, which is going to be a 12x16. The paper, this whole thing up to the perforation, is literally 12 by 9 or 9 by 12. Did we see that?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll make sure we see that whole thing.
Yeah.
So the whole thing will be fitting on there. For tools, kneaded eraser, white chalk for a highlight for the pinnacle value, we have a stump. This is to smooth things out. You can always also use your finger. Vine charcoal, willow charcoal, something that's not quite as dark. Usually it's going to be a little bit harder and easier to rub off. And then compressed charcoal is going to be a little darker and it's not going to rub off quite as easy. So my dark value will come from here. My in-between value will come here. The second value, the light value, the achievement value is going to come from the tone of the paper. And the highest value, the pinnacle, is going to come from my white chalk. I always want to start with the most forgiving tool I can. It just so happens to be this. So, again, just in your mind, you can lightly put it on your paper if you like. What is halfway? Halfway, vertical and horizontal, is going to give us basically 4 equal quadrants. Now this is nothing other than a conceptual tool, okay? A way to kind of see and place things and relate things onto the canvas. So this is a moonscape, and when you think about a moonscape, I guess before I start I should reiterate, we are designing a painting. We are not copying a reference. Whether that reference is a photograph, whether we're on site, in person, plein air, or in the studio with the model. That model's there for reference. Our jobs as artists is to take that reference and make good decisions and present it on a flat two-dimensional surface in a beautiful way. So the presentation on the two-dimensional surface, let me be clear, has 0 to do with our reference. It's a whole nother language. So if you start trying to match, you're not speaking in the language of beauty on a two-dimensional surface. Okay, so that's the first. The reason I say that the hardest thing about this is to give up your pre-existing thoughts, your assumptions, your prejudice, the ones you don't even realize you have. Okay? So all we're going to be doing is making some marks with a piece of burnt wood. And if we think about, okay, how can I make these marks to create something beautiful on the canvas? By solving that problem, you will achieve a lot more with your art than trying to solve the problem of copying something. So much of this has to do with which problems are you solving, and ultimately that's what you can read in the painter's composition, in the paintings, in the drawings. What was in the mind of the artist? What problem did she consider important enough to solve? Okay, so our problem is, how are we going to divide this rectangle up with 4 values? Since this is a moonscape, I want a lot of sky, and I want very little land. So if this is halfway, where do that, that even feels like too much to me. So if we went from halfway to halfway again, and then maybe down even further, what would that look like? Because our biggest division between just light and dark, in simplest terms, is going to be earth versus sky. So what's this first dark, and what proportion is it going to take here? Right, even before I worry about any ups or downs or little diagonals, let's just think again. If you'll slow down and think about this simply, all of you can solve these problems. We're creating the problems to solve, and the problem to solve here is how are we going to divide this canvas? If you've been studying with me at any time, for any time, hopefully you know by now that even division just kind of brings everything to a standstill. It kills everything, because life comes from movement, right? Movement's going to come from asymmetry, not symmetry, but asymmetry. So you want definitely more light than dark, or more dark than light. One of the two. Okay, so that's not a lot of land right here. And then from that land, we're going to have a couple of things kind of shooting off. One is our tree or our shrub, and that's going to be a dark that extends into the sky. And the main purpose of this is visual weight right here, and to point us towards the moon. So let's skip all the yiddle yaddle and just think about yiddle yaddle. I just made up a word, I think. That's awesome. So let's skip that made up word and jump right to the finish. The yiddle yaddle's that in between stuff. The what? The vagueness. Exactly what it sounds like. Yiddle yaddle. What? To the finish, and the finish is going to be the moon. So where do we want this moon? Well, now that we've got our big division, this is a moonscape, so we want to be about moon rising. We need plenty of sky. Let's think about what this composition is really about. We've got our dark tree here. We've got the white water where the ocean's meeting the land. The waves are breaking, coming along here. And that's going to do what? It's going to point us to the little town, the lights, the houses, the activity. And that's going to release us up to the moon. So I'm thinking of this almost like a triangle. And so the question is, for me, is the moon up here and the town over here and the tree right here? Well, then our triangle starts looking like that. And that's not a great use of this space, really, for a landscape and what we're trying to say. No. Moon rising, moon rising, moon rising. What is that going to look like? Do you think a moon at the top of the page is going to feel like a rising moon? Well, we want it to be closer to the land. And actually, if it's lower in the sky, then that's going to be more like a moon rising, isn't it? But with balance and not to go too much into it, considering all those things, I'm going to put that finish just above center. And when I look at it, it's going to be the right-hand side of the page. So I'm going to put a little mark, let's say about right there. Just a little indication. Now I can start thinking about my angles. Yeah, I could force my way into coming down here, but the second I do that, do you see that? It's just too severe. So we're going to want the angle to the town something like this. So let's put this over closer to the edge. Why? Because these lights are going to be much weaker than this light. Since this light is heavier, we're going to stick it closer to the fulcrum. And then these little lighter need to be towards to balance that weight. Right? So that's one way weight works. So if we come over here and say, okay, what if those distance lights are there? And then do we want this straight line? That's not going to probably look too good. We somehow would like the white caps coming like that. You know, I'm barely making marks right now because I'm thinking this out. I'm getting my vision. Right? If we had the vision, is this really a necessary step? No, if the vision's clear in your head, we can go. But if it's not, we're doing these exercises to get vision, right? Not to produce anything. Okay, so this is feeling pretty good to me. I think so. So then, if that moon's there, and if I want to point to it, so I just put that limb like that? How about no? How about no? For one, we're shooting just below the moon. If you set your goals just below where you want to go, what are the chances you're ever going to reach your goals? Pretty close to zero. You know, you may some luck in there, but maybe pretty close to zero. But what if I overshot that moon? Then if we overshoot and fall short, so that gives us a little wiggle room. What else do we know? Well, just like we don't necessarily want a big straight line right here, because straight isn't movement, straight is manufactured. We want things to seem alive. A curve is a little bit better. Okay, do I? Don't know if I want that high. We definitely want to tower over that town. Okay. Shakti, how do you know just what to say, when to say it? So she says that when you place things properly, the beauty reveals itself right away. It feels so simple, this beauty. One of the things I try to teach is, rather than doing more and more and being faster and faster and what's next, is do these simple things in a mindful way, in an aware way, so that you can start to feel when things are proper and beautiful. And when I say proper and beautiful, that's a matter of aesthetic balance. And we can learn that. So it thrills me that you're noticing that. So abstractly, I've got my big pieces in here. Very, very abstractly. Now we're going to flush this out. But before we start flushing it out, let's remind ourselves, what's the main movement? What's the main movement in a landscape? The main movement is near, which is the bottom of the page, to far as we go up. Now when there's sky, the sky at the top is going to be near us, and as we go closer to the horizon, that's the sky that's going to be furthest away from us. But it's also closest to the ground, which means it's usually kind of the warmest, the muckiest. There's usually some dirt. Very seldom does a clear sky go right to the land. If you're looking up at a mountain or something, might happen. But where there's people, usually there's not a clear horizon line. What? What? Shut up and draw? Okay. All right, I get it. Not yet. I know. So one way we're going to do near to far is size. So if our land is going to start right over here, and in the foreground, when I say land, and then I'm going to take that foreground all the way to here. Okay, so we're going from here to here. How do we know this is further away? Because it's higher on the canvas. Okay, so how else could we say further away? So even though we're not going to have other big trees, guess what else is down here? These other vertical little quote-unquote bushes, shrubs, weeds, I don't know what we're going to call them. And if this is this big, then down there, what if I make that big? That reinforces that near to far. So along with our verticals, we have horizontal flat land up here. How might I show near to far with that? Like literally, it is that simple. Now to get aesthetic balance and everything else, we need to take some other things in consideration. But the doorway into all of this is doing what you can and practicing what you do know. Most people, when they're trying to learn, are just trying to accumulate all this knowledge without necessarily practicing. Right? Nobody wants to practice, they just want to execute a painting. Man, I promise you, a little of the right practice is going to give you such better paintings. And once you come to realize that, then these studies, instead of being something that's in the way or it's kind of a bother, they actually become a joy. Right? Because this is much a part of the creation as when we're putting paint on the thing. All right, so we talked big to small. How else could we do big to small? What else is big to small here? Well, this white water on the wave here is probably going to be the tone of the paper, but just so that we can see it a little bit. What if the white water here was like that? And then the white water here was like that. And the white water here is like that. And the white water here. Yeah? So again, just big to small on a beautiful curve that works with our composition. Okay, so what we're coming in on 25 minutes. I don't have very much marked down on my paper, but boy howdy, I feel good about what's there, and it's going to be pretty easy to kind of flush this out. So to flush this out, then we've got to make a decision. Yes, you're the artist, you have to make the decision. How big is this moon going to be? Well, we've done near to far in this little corner, right? We did it vertically. We talked about doing it horizontally. We did big to far with the crashing waves. Right? I haven't got to the lights yet. We're just running out of time. We've got the moon. Okay? So how are these related in space? In other words, in minutes, how long is it going to take you to walk to this tree? Okay? And then how long would it take you to walk to the town? And how long would it take you to walk to the moon? So how are we going to show that? So when I started the program by saying so much of this depends on what problem you're solving. So many of us are trying to copy exactly how this little bush works, rather than telling the viewer about the distance between these things. And I'd like to propose to you that your work is going to get 100 times better after you get this concept if you change the problem you're solving to literally solving the problem of depth, of near to far. Now we can solve it with this piece versus that piece versus that piece. Then we can come back within these little pieces and solve it this part of the land to that part of the land, this part of the beach to that part of the beach, this part of the hills to that part of the hills, the near ocean to the far ocean by bigger, right, and more separation. So, why so much talking today after I even told myself to get to drawing a couple of times? The purpose is to say, hey, you need to slow down. It's not just to see how fast you can fill this up with marks, but it's to see how good of decisions you can make on where to put those marks and how to put those marks. Oh, you don't see that in the reference? Yeah, neither do I. But you know what? That's a better mark and it's more beautiful on this two-dimensional piece of paper. And I mean, no offense, but I don't really give a hoot about that picture. Right? I mean, Why do I care about that? But the drawing. Now the drawing. That's something else. That's something else. How else could we show distance? Value, weight, all right, one way we can put this up front is to make sure it's a good deal darker. There's not as much atmosphere into it. It's a cleaner value. That atmosphere hasn't yet affected it. 2 minutes, oh my goodness. But again, even if I get nowhere near a finish, this is very valuable. Right? Because I'm building my vision. This study isn't about a finish. It's about the vision of what you have influence over. You have influence over the size of this mark. You have influence over how dark or light this mark is. Right, isn't that crazy how quick that can happen? Now this isn't nearly enough. This isn't nearly enough here. Let's see what we're going to do. The near to far, yeah. And then I know all of this is part of that big dark. So then I can go ahead and group this again. So much of this is simplifying, and then making just a few little distinctions. Right? But most of the work is in the simplifying. Not in the giving them more information, but giving less information that's more useful. Look at that, and the time is up. Okay, so this will be where I stop right now. Then tonight, I'll do part 2. So if you're doing the landscape and trying to do this, before you see the next part, try to place the size of your tree. Where's your moon going? Where's your town going? Right, what angle? So these same decisions I made, try to do that. You can follow along and try to copy me, or you can try to find it on your own, depending on your level of experience. But none of this is beyond you. Now, is yours going to come out like this the first time? Unless you have quite a bit of experience, probably not. So the purpose, again, isn't to do it so beautifully, but it's to do it. Even if at the beginning, I don't get it. Well, by continually doing it and hanging out, you'll figure out, oh, that's why we're together, so to give you those moments. Okay, but to have that, you got to do the work. All right, everybody, thank you so much, and we'll see you tonight for part 2. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.